all began with 4 orbs, spheres that carried the power to save the world or destroy it. They were labeled according to the 5 elements of Japanese mythology: earth, fire, wind, and water, with the 5th representing the void beyond our everyday understanding or experience. These were changed to crystals in the remakes of Final Fantasy that followed. The concept was strangely absent from the first sequel, but returned in 3 to birth the job system. Cecil began 4 by stealing the water crystal from Acidia, King Tycoon witnessed the wind crystal shatter in the beginning of 5, and the espers from 6 disintegrated into shards of crystallized magicite. 7's materia harken back to the sphere model, as they not only helped the heroes advance in power, but almost caused Meteor to run right through the planet. 8, like 2, had neither. Rather than receive their energy from objects, Squall and his classmates drew it directly through enemies, or points plugged into the planet. 9 reflected its sprite history by making a crystal caught between dimensions responsible for the existence of life on Gaia, but 10 and 10-2 jumped back to spheres as experience markers and puzzle pieces. 11 started literally with a spinning crystal, along with the set of 5 that created the diverse races. And although 12 deferred its spiritual source to the zodiac signs, their emblems were encased in ornate crystals once their corresponding espers had been defeated. The Sun Christ in 12 chipped off 3 shards of brand new nethicite that united Ivalice under the rule of King Wraithwall. 10 and a half of the 12 Final Fantasies have used crystals or orbs to serve as the emotional link to the planet's life force. If one were to create a Final Fantasy from scratch, deciding on one, the other, or neither is a good place to start. The 12 core entries bear no direct ties aside from rumors and mild suggestions, but their structure has held long enough to imprint several traits on the franchise. In this 13th and final chapter of our retrospective, let's look at the ones that left the most identifying marks. Following crystals and orbs, the story has to take shape, and there are several common themes to call upon when constructing the narrative. The kingdoms in each Final Fantasy have gotten bigger and bigger, but they've almost always been dominated by an ancient evil, or stood to oppress a much smaller rebellion. There has often been a conflict of nature versus technology. The later fantasies centered on an eternal struggle for the planet to renew itself. With their world imbalanced, a group would volunteer or be summoned to fulfill a destined ritual and vanquish the forces of evil single-handedly. The origin of the first gathering is unknown because you could assemble them yourself. The following 4 parties were all orphaned youths, or lost their parents as the conflict rose. The second team likely knew each other from childhood, as well as the third, which was raised by the same guardian. The fourth largely served in the military together, and the fifth discovered each other as the long journey began. The sixth joined a resistance group that first gave a name to the frequently outnumbered gathering of forces opposing the tyrannical government. Banon's army in 6 was called the Returners. Barrett's clan in 7 was known as Avalanche. Renoa's rebels waved the flag of the Forest Owls in 8. Baku's Tantalus troop in 9 might have thought that they were up to no good, but their actions ended up saving Princess Garnet and her kingdom. And 11 had Tenshodo and a number of other resistance groups. Aside from the Gullwings moniker, the alliances in 10 and 12 were anonymous. The team count was 4 in the first 3 Final Fantasies, 5 and 4, and 4 again in parts 5 and 6. It dropped to 3 in episodes 7 and 8, returned to 4 and 9, and went back to 3 in 10 and 10-2. 11 fanned out to 6 to accommodate multiplayer parties, and 12 halved the group once again to 3. To sum up, that's 4 with 3, 5 with 4, and 1 with 5 and 6. But numbers mean nothing without a solid combination of characters from varying classes. 5 was the first where you weren't able to finish the game with one of the members you started with, and 6 was the first that let you assemble a squad of numerous collected characters from a selection menu. The themes brought up in the naming of the playable populace stretch over a variety of influences. Aspects of nature heavily inspired many characters. Some draw symbols from Japanese culture, such as the original names of the main characters in 10, Tita and Yuna, being an Okinawan reference to the sun and moon. Others, such as Cloud and Squall, derive from English roots. Vivi, from 9, appears in numerous Romance languages as variances of the verb to live. Sarah, the subject of the first Final Fantasy quest ever, means princess in Hebrew, and Cain translates roughly as spear in the same language. Cain may also be a reference to the biblical deceiver who slew his brother and was branded an outcast by God. Some translations have even added meaning to words that had slim backgrounds to begin with. When 6 was translated into English, the protagonist, initially named Tina, which in Japanese is just a derivative of other female terms, was dubbed Terra by writer Ted Woosley, which means earth in Latin and monster in Greek. Once there was a crew to command, they were given attributes to aid them in battle and define their role in the party. Since Final Fantasy I, there have been 3 different ways to distribute them. The model used in the first game gave you options to mix and match, but the sprites themselves couldn't break out of their designated profession. This formula was repeated in 4, 9, 10, and to a lesser extent 6. 3 allowed you to swap job hats at random, and that system was refined in 5, 10.2, and the Online 11. In Parts 7, 8, and 12, classes held less weight, allowing you to customize your entire team to your liking. With the tools in place, you can't have good without evil. The villains of Final Fantasy have been known to steal the spotlight away from the honest heroes that fight bravely to stop them, but their defining qualities aren't always black and white. Some of the antagonists are fairly straightforward though. Garland and the Emperor of Palamecia seemed maliciously trapped in their desire to dominate the world, but after Zand felt betrayed by Noah, he went on a revenge binge that has inspired several followers. These can occasionally obscure the true bad guy, as some would argue Hojo, or even Gast, is the true architect of Sephiroth's rage, and the murderous soldier was simply pushed too far. More often than not, there's more to the tale than meets the eye, such as Adia's reversal and eventual camaraderie. In a few others, the opposition you meet at the very beginning becomes the unthinkable evil you face in the end.